Healing takes time. So symptoms may fade quickly in your young, healthy, athletic population, but the underlying physiologic recovery takes around 3 to 4 weeks. Hey there, I'm Dr. Mark. I'm a concussion specialist who's been working with hundreds of athletes over the last 5 years at all levels, from high school, varsity, pro, collegiate, to ensure safe return to sport after concussion. One of the biggest questions I get, particularly from the parents of my younger athletes, is when is it safe for my kid to return? And it's usually in reference to the tournament next weekend. So if you or someone you know plays contact sports, understanding the return to play process, the timelines, and why they're important, it can make all the difference in terms of a full recovery or long-term setbacks. So in this video, we'll briefly cover the science of concussion recovery. We'll talk about the stepwise return to play protocol that's been proposed by the International Concussion and Sports Group. We'll talk about why symptom-free doesn't mean fully healed. Just because you don't feel something means you're ready to go back. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about, kind of bridging off of that, we're going to talk about the most common mistakes that athletes, coaches, parents make when clearing for play. So let's get into it. For starters, what is return to play? You'll see it abbreviated RTP, you'll see it abbreviated RTS, return to sport. It's essentially the structured process that helps determine when an athlete is safe to return to full participation, full contact gameplay in their sport with no more risk than they had just from playing the sport in general. The injury is over, they're performing well. If they're going to get hurt, they're going to get hurt, and it's not from the concussion. They're fully ready to play. The reason we have this in place is because we want to prevent premature return to play. The reason there is we don't want a new injury. We don't want a repeat concussion. That's going to delay recovery. And if the timing is right in a bad way, we risk second impact syndrome. This is a controversially rare but a fatal condition where two repeated mild traumatic brain injuries too close together lead to swelling of the brain that is fatal, and we don't want that. So a couple key return to play concerns are the neurometabolic cascade and orthopedic risks. The neurometabolic cascade, I've done videos on both of these before, but the neurometabolic cascade, essentially simplified, concussions cause an inflammatory and an energy deficit and dysregulation in the brain. And what we'll see is that the energy deficit peaks in about 3 to 5 days, but it starts to turn the corner at about 5 to 10 days, and it normalizes in 21 to 30. And so what we'll see is that symptoms are usually their worst about 3 to 5 days. But as that energy picks back up, your brain goes, oh, I'm producing energy again. I feel pretty good. And in a good percentage of people, within about 5 to 10 days, their symptoms are going to go away, especially your young, healthy athletes. The problem is that symptoms disappear before brain metabolism dysregulation resolves. And so what we've got is this potential 7-day return. We see it all the time in the NFL, 4 to 7 days. That's a high risk situation. Brain energy levels are still low. They're not back to normal. Just because you're producing ATP doesn't mean that ATP level in the brain is back to baseline. And so that's a risk. The other risk is the orthopedic risk. The second problem we want to address is orthopedic risk. So there's a mix of data, but the general trend is that concussed athletes are around twice as likely to suffer another injury, usually an orthopedic injury. We've got a lot of lower extremity data. We've got some upper extremity data, but you're going to injure your knee, your hip, your ankle, your shoulder, twice as likely to in the season after a concussion, likely due to deficits in balance, coordination, and reaction time that just weren't properly screened for in the initial concussion recovery. So it's super quick go over the return to play progression. This could be a whole talk on its own, and it's kind of heady and boring, but it is good to know the general flow. So one thing to know is that recovery is not a straight line. It is a stepwise process that allows the athlete, in conjunction with me or whoever the provider is, to gradually reintroduce activity without triggering symptoms beyond a mild level. So there's 6 stages: symptom-limited activity, light aerobic activity, sport-specific activity, non-contact activity, full contact activity, and then stage 6 is gameplay. So when we're looking at symptom-limited activity, this starts right away. And that's where we're doing normal daily activities, maybe some light school, a light workload, usually from home for the first couple of days. And the general goal here is that we're trying to avoid symptom flares more than 2-point increase on a 10-point scale that last for more than an hour. So if your symptoms flare 1 point or 2 points, that's fine, especially if it goes away within the hour. If you're doing more than that, if you start to go 2 or 3 points and it lasts for more than an hour, it lasts for a couple hours, or it kind of ruins your day, you did a little bit too much. That wasn't symptom-limited activity. That was a bit too much for your brain at the time. We're trying to keep you active, but not so active you feel like garbage. Stage 2 ideally begins at around 48 to 72 hours. And this is where we've tested your Buffalo concussion treadmill test. We've done a bike test, some sort of sub-max exercise tolerance testing, and we found your heart rate threshold to begin active rehab. And that's when we're doing the light cardio, the stationary bike, the treadmill, the rower, the elliptical, something where we're doing sub-symptom aerobic exercise to increase the heart rate, improve your CO2 tolerance, and start to get that blood flow and metabolism regulated again. Once you can pass the Buffalo concussion treadmill test, once you've demonstrated normal aerobic exercise tolerance, we move you on to sport-specific activity. So you're not quite back into full practice yet, but maybe you're back with the team. If you're a hockey player, maybe you're doing dry land training. Maybe if you're a football player, you're kind of starting to do agility drills, starting to maybe run routes without other players. You're doing drills relevant to the sport in a completely non-contact fashion. And the idea is to reintroduce movement patterns, start to add some dual tasking. And I personally will actually start to introduce resistance training at this stage. Some folks, some guidelines say don't do that until stage 4. I do it at this stage. It helps with a whole bunch of things, especially your psychology when you get to lift and feel normal. Stage 4 is non-contact training. And this is essentially, you throw on a penny, you throw on a different color jersey, you throw on something where you can do all the non-contact drills with your team. You are doing full practice without contact. And the goal here is to sort of get timing, get coordination, get your reaction time, get your game-like exercise tolerance back. This is a huge win mentally to just be back with the boys, be back with the girls, be back on the field, the court, the ice, whatever. Stage 4 is exciting. So to move from stage 4 to stage 5, full contact practice, this is where you're going non-contact stage 4 to full contact stage 5. In my office in complete concussions clinics, we're going to do an exertion protocol. The Gapsky-Goodman, Chicago Blackhawks, there's research on the dynamic exertion exit protocol. But we're going to do some sort of dynamic exercise tolerance testing before sending you to full contact, and I'll talk about why in a second. But once you're in full contact practice, you're just back into training. You're back into ensuring that you have full tolerance to your sport's demands, intensities, timing, and specifically contact. When you can tolerate that, which usually occurs in 21 to 50 days, 3 to 4 weeks in most athletes, up to 50 days in other athletes, we're back to game play. And the game here is just to make sure that you can maintain full exertion contact without symptom in the game. But usually by this point, you've demonstrated that in full contact practice and you're just playing again. Important rules for the return to play process is that there's a 24-hour minimum per stage with no worsening of the symptoms. You've got to be at stage 1 with no real worsening of symptoms before going on to stage 2. You've got to pass the Buffalo concussion treadmill test before going on to stage 3. You got to have at least 24 hours there, at least 24 hours at stage 4, at least 24 hours at stage 5. And we'll talk about why me and a lot of other evidence-based concussion practitioners within the Complete Concussions Network slow that down a little bit. If your symptoms worsen, so they go up more than 2 points, they go up 3, 4, 5 points, you're going to drop back a stage and wait 24 hours before progressing again. If all this sounds confusing, that's why specialists like me exist. Reach out to one of us. We'll help you through this. So let's talk about some nuance in the return to play process. Let's talk about why baseline testing matters and why exertion protocols matter. So many athletes return to play way too soon, even at the professional NFL level. This is because traditional symptom-based assessments don't tell the whole story. And unfortunately, this was recently published, far too many sports medicine physicians put most of their confidence in symptom scores. It's insane. So quickly, baseline testing, this isn't going to be a whole deep dive, but what it does is establish you versus you. You pre-injury healthy to you post-recovery healthy. How close do those match up? It establishes a personal benchmark for cognition, for balance, for reaction time, for visual processing. We want to know that your cognitive physical performance is normal and you can tolerate dynamic exertion safely in an office before we throw you out into the battlefield of football, of hockey, of lacrosse, of rugby, whatever. The standard tools for baseline testing are going to include the SCAT, the impact, or King Devic, reaction time, force plate. We use at Complete Concussions the DANA, the Defense Automated Neurobehavioral Assessment, instead of the impact. There's a lot of research showing that it's probably the better move to go that way. So the problem with only going on symptoms for return to play, I just picked on that a little bit. Let's talk about it. When you score symptoms, you're usually using the SCAT 6 now. It used to be the SCAT 5, but you're using the SCAT 6. There's a post-concussion symptom scale on there. 22 symptoms, rank them 0 to 6. 0 is none, 6 is severe. If you use that, again, I talked about it with brain energy metabolism. that's going to normalize within 7 to 10 days. We know that the balance error scoring system as a part of the SCAT normalizes within about 3 days. This is way too soon. This is faster than your metabolic recovery. This is faster than a lot of other metrics like reaction time, like balance, like visual processing. Your clinical and performance recovery takes longer than your symptom recovery in most cases. We've got studies that show that many athletes still exhibit deficits up to 30 days post-injury when tested with exertion protocols, when tested with dual tasking, when tested with balance, visual processing, reaction time. When we throw you in a dynamic environment or ask for actual kind of sports level performance, we don't always see it in that 7 to 10 days that you feel better. We see it closer to 21, 30, 35 days. Now, talking about exertion protocols, this is one that when I explain it to parents, to coaches, to athletes, it's super intuitive, but we just don't see it widespread yet. Standard aerobic testing, Buffalo concussion treadmill test, it reveals sort of the hidden autonomic dysfunction, the exercise intolerance. That's fantastic. But we need to move on to advanced return to play testing before we progress from stage 4 to stage 5, before we go non-contact to full contact. I want to know that you can not only tolerate steady state aerobic treadmill exercise, and so what if you have symptoms, no symptoms at rest sitting on my table in the office. I want to know if we sprint you, if we have you jump, if we have you do burpees, if we have you twist, if we have you turn, and we have you do dynamic exercise that mimics game-like intensities and game-like maneuvers and head movements and eye movements and body movements that would put you in a sport-like condition. If you can't tolerate that in the safety of my office where no one is coming for you, you are not ready to play. So as a part of the complete concussions return to play flow, as a part of our return to play process, it is to move from stage 4 to stage 5, you have to pass a Gapski-Goodman. You have to pass the Chicago Blackhawks test. We're going to crush you on the bike. We're going to have you do some agility hurdles. We're going to have you do 180 jumps. We're going to have you cool down, and then we're going to retest your performance. We're going to see, can you actually tolerate dynamic exertion? Because again, no one's trying to take your head off in my office. You should be able to sprint. You should be able to jump if you're actually ready to play. So some key takeaways in the big picture here. When it comes to concussion recovery, it's not just about waiting for your symptoms to disappear. You might feel better by the tournament next week, but it's not that you're actually ready for it. We need to see the metrics. We need to see the performance. And so to do this, a comprehensive return to play approach considers the metabolic recovery, the physical readiness, and cognitive resilience. One of the other things that we also are starting to look at in newer research is, does the athlete psychologically feel confident enough to return to play? This is a whole different variable that changes the game, because you might be physically ready to play, but if you're scared to go back out there, your injury risk is high just from that. So let's make sure not only are you physically ready, you're psychologically ready, you're cognitively ready. Everything is back to normal before we return you to play. So here's what we've learned. Healing takes time. So symptoms may fade quickly in your young, healthy, athletic population, but the underlying physiologic recovery takes around 3 to 4 weeks. So a structured return to play protocol is essential for athletes going through gradual, stepwise, increasingly dynamic, increasingly sport-specific exercise through those 3 weeks so that you return to play safe, recovered, and ready. You've been training. And then exertion testing is a must. Return to play decisions should never be based on symptoms at rest. And holy shit, they're made that way too much. This is insane. I hope this soapbox stays. When you're sitting in some sterile doctor's office on table paper and they go, how are you feeling? And you go, pretty good. And they go, sounds like you can play. What? Horseshit. To make this even cleaner, baseline testing sets a benchmark. Without pre-injury data, it's harder to assess full recovery. There's arguments against baseline testing, and this could be a whole separate video, but depending on your race, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, your ADHD status, your mental health status, all your numbers and your symptom scores and your baseline test is going to make it's going to be different. It's going to be unique to you. And that makes normative data pretty hard to use. And so if you have a preseason baseline test, it is way safer and way better to compare you versus you to make that return to play decision. So if you found this video helpful, if you liked it, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the YouTube things. It's free for you. It helps me and I appreciate it. As usual, I want you to drop a comment. Let me know how long your concussion recovery took. As a personal anecdote, when I played hockey, my last concussion when I was playing in college, I was in the ACHA. I took a hit. My coach rubbed my shoulders. I played the next shift. I didn't take any time off. That was a stupid decision in hindsight. I dealt with headaches, anxiety, and sleep issues for months after that. So don't do what I did. Learn from my mistakes. And until next time, I'm Dr. Mark. See you.